Ivan Toney, of course, now back playing for Brentford, captaining Brentford on occasion, and of course back after being found guilty and after admitting betting breaches. He was out for 8 months, wasn't he? But he's come back. He's come back with an impact. He didn't go in the last window, and it was largely thought it was highly unlikely that he would. But as for heading on out to another club in the summer, yeah, it looks likely. And Thomas Frank certainly indicated that when he spoke to the Danish media the other day. The Brentford manager said it is quite obvious that Ivan Toney will most likely be sold this summer. We also know what he's worth. I don't think there are many strikers in the world who are better than him right now. And then we thought, is this going to be a case when someone comes back after speaking to a foreign outlet and says, yeah, that was kind of lost in translation, I didn't really mean that? No, absolutely not. Because this was Thomas Frank speaking this morning.
It's the same message I said the whole time, that I would love him to stay forever. The reality is he got 1 more year left on the contract in the summer. I think he's been pretty open about maybe playing for a top club in the future. So I guess there is a couple of scenarios. He leaves in the summer, he leaves in the winter, in a year time, or he stays until the end. If he's leaving whatever, summer, winter, or the summer after, I think it would be fantastic to see him playing for a top club.
So nothing's been lost in translation?
No.
Well done, I recognise that voice. It was Jeremy from Sky. But Simon, do Brentford have much of a negotiating hand here? I mean, after the debates around clubs and their due diligence following the Newcastle Sandro Tonali case, how should prospective buyers view Ivan Toney?
Well, they should view him as a very good player, certainly. And I think there's a lot to be said that he's one of the best centre forwards around. I think that's pretty fair, because they are quite a limited species in terms of top centre forwards. You can really name them on the sort of fingers of a couple of hands at very best in world football.
So what for you? He's right up there. Like
I think he's
top six in the country.
I think he could certainly play in one of the top 6 clubs, and I think he will play in one of the top 6 clubs. The challenge for him is, given the circumstances, we spoke about Tonelli and how football clubs could have done due diligence and put themselves in a better position. Yeah. And maybe that going forward, players will be asked to make declarations and sign waivers, so if they find themselves being consequenced, clubs won't have to pick up wages in the interim period, and transfer fees will be insulated by some form of protection, albeit that's a difficult part. In this instance, he doesn't have to sign that declaration, does he? Because it's public knowledge that he's had a gambling problem. Yeah. And also, trotted out of his mouth, I believe, is that it leads towards some form of addiction. I have my reservations about that, but who am I to speak on behalf of someone else's condition? I believe that was something that was trotted out when people were loading up their guns about the reality of what his fine should be and how he'd got what he'd kind of merited. If that's the case, then you are signing somebody that is potentially damaged goods in terms of the way that they operate in the world. Unless he's been cured of that particular addiction and cured of that challenge, then they're going to have to price that into their thinking if it is a real and legitimate challenge.
And if it is, how does that affect the price?
Well, Brentford won't want it to affect the price. Brentford won't suggest that ultimately any performances over the last 2 or 3 years when he's been having these challenges have been impacted. So if the boy's been having these challenges and these challenges are real, well, it hasn't affected the way he played, did it? The only thing that affected him was he got consequence for actions of 3, 4, 5 years ago.
But you could cite it in your negotiation, couldn't you?
Well, of course you would.
You know, we're going to go to... We'll bid 50. We're not going to go to 60 because... You never know with Ivan.
Yeah,
you know where I'm going with that?
Well, absolutely. But the thing is that the argument about the situation surrounding Newcastle, and I think it was Inter Milan that they bought for Tonelli from, wasn't it? Was no declaration, no information. Well, there's no need for that because it's AC Milan. So it's all over the press. And it's all over everyone knows Ivan Toney's particular malaise or historic malaise. So I don't think that will I don't think it will cut any mustard with Brentford, because if they can get competitive tension going between football clubs as to who want this guy's service, the market will drive his price. What they'll get, what anyone will get is, of course, they can put their position in very clear that if any repeats going forward and Ivan Toney repeats his behaviour, then there has to be some form of balance. Yeah. It's a difficult one. Because if you've got clubs in against one another and they both want the player, and in the end it becomes to who will pay the most and who will overlook the most, it becomes that conversation. But I do think
1 year left in his contract, though, Simon.
I mean, that part of the equation. Yeah, this is the time for Ivan Toney to move, because Brentford may not have a great season next year. He may get himself injured. He may not have a great season. He may not get picked for England. And then what he gets on the upside is that all of the salary that he will be getting, all of the transfer fee. If he goes in a free in a year's time, all of the opportunity for the transfer fee can find its way into an inflated salary. And let me be clear, one of the motivations, besides playing for a big club, for this young man and those around him, is the increase in his salary. Right? And that will get everybody paid and everybody an opportunity, and certainly the boy. And so, of course, if you go on a free, that becomes even more inflated because no one's paying 60, 70 million quid for the player. If he wants, 200 grand a week, which is, I'm sure, what he wants, and he's on 70 grand a week at Brentford, and if someone's got to pay a 70 million pound transfer fee, in a year's time, no one's got to pay that 70 million quid, he can start asking for 200, 250 grand a week and possibly getting it, right? But that means he's got to have another year, which means his currency could be less. The bigger club's appetite could be satiated by buying someone else from somewhere else. Right? So his time is to go now. And of course, Brentford if he's not going to sign a new contract at Brentford aren't going to let that clock tick down.
No.
I realise that Matthew Benham's stock in trade is to not blink in the eyes of odds.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is they'll be selling him in the summer. He'll be gone in the summer. And it's about how much money Brentford can get from the situation, given A, people might use the situation against them. B, they've got a clock that's ticking down. But C, on the other side of it, Ivan Toney wants to go now. Is he 28? 28, 29?
Well, it would seem so. I mean, it's the same kind of thing that we saw happening at West Ham with Sullivan and Declan, wasn't it? This open declaration, it's time for him to go. Thomas Frank saying the same thing.
No, he's going.
It's time for him to go.
I would be absolutely gobsmacked if Ivan Toney is still he's 27, he's 28 in March, right? So Ivan Toney has made it pretty clear. Thomas Frank knows what's going on with the situation. No one can criticise besides the 7 months that he let his club down. That's why I was irritated about the all-conquering hero and the fanfare and light displays and all that cobblers, because ultimately he'd let his club down and he should have been back in the side, earning back people's trust.
Sure.
But prior to that, he had been an absolutely outstanding player for Brentford.
Yeah.
And worthy of all the plaudits, worthy of an England call-up, and worthy of all the recognition, and worthy of the association with playing with one of the big six clubs.
So, Simon, second guess it for me. Say he scores a few goals from now on in, and Brentford stay comfortably in the Premier League. You want to buy him, what do you buy him for?
27, 28, I think you're probably going to be... Depends what the market's doing in given the fact that we're seeing the situations being artificially, well, not artificially, structurally enforced upon clubs now.
Yeah.
But a free market with some of the well-heeled buyers in it, I would suspect probably 70 million.
70 million. Oof. I think Brentford would be happy at that, would they not? Many people not happy with the atmosphere, or lack of it more precisely, at Twickenham. When it comes to the Six Nations, apparently Twickenham isn't what it used to be in terms of atmosphere. And there's a group of people doing something about that. The players. We're going to talk about that, the other side of the bulletin. There's a message coming in this morning. You guys, thanks for making my life on the road much more entertaining. Well, that's good to hear.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.